Welcome to Pod Band Pipecast, the premier pipe band podcast.
Yay!
I think we should stop letting people write it down. I think it's cheating.
I actually didn't even look at it.
Oh, okay.
Easy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a true fan, you should know what it is.
Yeah, you're right.
True
Sure.
fans.
I've heard enough of that. No.
So, hello everyone. We're here with Angus Burke. Thank you for being on the show, Angus.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Angus is in Indiana, and that's the wonderful thing about the pandemic. Literally the only wonderful thing is that we can do things virtually now.
Yeah.
So Angus has started or is one of the key starting members of the Bloomington Piping Society in Bloomington, Indiana. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that in a bit. But first, we're going to get to know him and his piping career and all kinds of stuff. So then when he does tell us about the Piping Society and what it does, it will make a lot more sense. So let's get to it.
So, how did you get into piping?
So that was sort of not my choice originally. So my story is my dad came home one day with a practice chanter. I wanted to play like guitar or something. It was either like tuba or guitar. I don't know why, but it was one of those. And my dad came home with a practice chanter one day and told me, "You're learning bagpipes. You have a lesson on Wednesday. That's that." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Then I guess that's what I'm doing." So I went to some lessons and I hated it at first.
Because bagpipes,
Well, it was very hard and changing like top hand, bottom hand stuff and the crossing notes. And I thought it was the worst thing ever. Especially I had no idea where it was supposed to go to. I just had the practice chanter. So that's how it started. But then I ended up joining, after I was able to play pipes, I joined a kids band and the community of that, I really enjoyed that atmosphere. And so I stuck with it because of the kids band, but I started because I just came home and there was a chanter that I was supposed to be playing.
And where was that? Just to remind people that don't know.
So I grew up in the Portland, Oregon metro area, but I lived across the river in Vancouver, Washington.
Okay.
Which important to add the Portland bit because there's a Vancouver in Canada. I'm not from that Vancouver.
It's pretty close too.
Yeah, it's only like 4 hours. It's maybe 5, but it's Vancouver, Washington is a suburb of Portland, and that's where I was. And my instructor was there, but my band was in Portland.
That's a good tip for the parenting episode. Just come home with a practice chanter and schedule some lessons.
Yeah, you're doing this now.
And I was 8 at the time.
Wow.
So they don't really know to say no. I'm not doing that at that age. It's like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to. So
Dad says I have to, so I have to.
Well, and it turned out okay. So
it did. Well, and ultimately, I did get to get to a certain age. It's where you do choose to stick with it. It was kind of thrust upon me, but I ended up choosing to stay and continue playing. So,
right. And continuing to play, like we've been talking a lot about during the pandemic, just continuing to do what you can. And, if you didn't quit when you were 8,
Not gonna quit now.
Sure as heck not going to quit now.
I've had 22, 23 years of opportunity to quit. Yeah. So.
Yet. Yeah, no, that's kind of depressing.
I feel like I've gone through enough that I don't see what would cause that at this point. So,
I mean, we just got through 2020, so let's not.
Yeah,
let's not jinx anything.
Yeah. So you mentioned the kids band in Portland. What in the entirety of your piping, what bands have you played with and how did all of that happen?
I've played in a grand total of 5 bands in 3 different states, 4 states, depending on the last band, how you want to classify where they're located. But First band was Sir James MacDonald Pipe Band, which when I joined was the Oregon Piper Society Junior Pipe Band. And within 2 years of joining them, they changed their name, rebranded everything. So for the most part, it's the Sir James MacDonald Pipe Band. And they were created in the early 90s as a way to do youth education in the Portland metro area. My instructor was, my private tutor was one of the band instructors. And part of what he was doing, along with some of the other instructors, was they taught new players and then they plugged them into the band. And that was that's how I got there, was my instructor plugged me in to Sir James. And then I was there for 7 years until I moved to Arizona. And that's when I joined Mesa, Caledonia.
That's how it connects.
Yeah, that's you guys. So we ended up picking, because like, as you know, there's plenty of bands in the Phoenix area. But at the time, that was in 2007 or so, Mesa had a grade 4 and a grade 3 unit at the time. And we joined Mesa because they, were a similar competitive level as Sir James. Sir James had just gotten upgraded to grade 3 a year before we left. And so my brother, my sister at the time, we all wanted to play in a band that was similar to Sir James in ability level. And then Mesa having a feeder, like a grade 4 teaching band, was also an attractive feature, because we just came from this band that was primarily a teaching organization. And so Mesa just kind of fit with everything that we came from to be there. I played actively with Mesa for about 3 years until I spent a lot more time doing college stuff. And so I was still a member of the band, but I was only there intermittently after 2010 or so. And then I moved to Indiana. And late college, right after college, I didn't do a whole lot of piping. I kind of got back into it because my sister was getting married and she wanted my brother and I to play pipes at the wedding. So I needed to start playing pipes again. So when I did that, I wanted to join a band at some point, but I was very, very cash strapped at the time. And I had a weird work schedule, so I couldn't really travel for bands. So I joined the local performing band, the Southern Indiana Pipes and Drums. And I played with them for about 10 months. And then I wanted to play in a competitive band again. So I joined Fountain Trust Pipe Band out of Covington, Indiana. I went there because they're a grade 4 unit. And they were the closest competing band to me. And they were 2 hours away from us. So,
Yikes.
And so I played with Fountain Trust for a while. We got upgraded to grade 3 while I was playing with them. And then we had a lot of personnel changeover. We went back down to grade 4. And then I wanted to do a little bit more, something that was a bit more challenging for me. And having played in the Midwest for a good 4 years at that point, I built a lot of connections in my solo work for solo competitions with other competitors. And many of the people I befriended were in the Greater Midwest Pipe Band, which is the band I currently play with, grade 2 out of Battle Creek, Michigan. And so I joined them in late 2018. I played with them in 2019, and I'm still a member, but we haven't really, played anywhere since 2019.
And why is that?
Yeah.
Why aren't you playing?
It's a bit of a mystery to me. I don't know. So we still do practices. So we're getting together every other week or so. I'm doing virtual practices just to keep all the tunes going. Yeah, those are all the bands I've played with at this point.
Nice. So you've been one of those people that's like, I'm going to do it. And if I have to drive 2 hours to band practice.
Dedication.
Well, when I first moved to Indiana, when I was in Sir James and in Mesa, band practice was about 45 minutes away in the same town. And when I first moved out here, I knew there's the Louisville Pipe Band in Louisville, Kentucky, and there's the Fountain Trust Pipe Band in Covington. They were each about 2 hours away. One was a grade 5 band, one was a grade 4 band. And I had never gone more than an hour for a band practice. other than when I was commuting down from Flagstaff to play with Mesa, but I was in college and that was different. So I was like, I am not going to drive 2 hours for a pipe band. No way. Because I was spoiled growing up.
Yeah.
And then I was like playing with like a non-competing band for a while, and I missed the competition. And I was like, all right, I'll drive, I guess. And then I did that for, 4 or 5 years. And I was like, well, I want to do something a little bit more, but I'm going to have to drive 4.5 hours to get there. And so that's what I do now.
But hey, that just means lots of time in the car to listen to podcasts like ours.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. My podcast listening has dropped so far because of COVID. Like I would download a bunch of podcasts on my phone, and then I would just listen to like you guys and Rab and all the and a couple other ones that are not pipe band related. And that was kind of what I did every month. I just blasted through, because it's like 8 or 9 hours in a car or once a month. So I went through an awful lot of podcasts then. So I was able to like consume all of the month's podcasts in a single trip. But I've been much spottier since COVID started because I don't have the driving.
understandably.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like the drive at this point, but I hated it when I first started. But I also hadn't been driving that long when I first started, so I was like, "There's no way." I don't understand why I'd want to spend 9 or 10 hours in a car every month.
And at least it's only once a month and not,
Every Friday.
Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I know when I was in Mesa, when I lived in Flagstaff, it was every other week I went down. It wasn't every Friday; it was every other Friday that I came, because I came down with Anne every other week, and that was about an hour and a half each way. I think maybe closer to 2. An hour and a half to my parents' house. It was 2 hours to band every other week, and that was okay. Again, I was in college; it was fine. It's a little different when you work 8 hours
Yeah.
every day, and so.
Yeah.
So, aside from the drive, what do you like about piping?
So my big thing that has kept me into it is ultimately the community. Like I like being around other pipers. I think folks in the community are on the whole very nice people, and I like, over the course of my life, like across decades and across vast geographic spaces, I have like people I know everywhere, and I like being able to, it's comforting to have folks like that and have these lifelong relationships. As a child, we moved an awful lot, and so I didn't have a lot of long-term relationships with other people because I was little. And, once we moved away, that was pretty much the end of friendships because I was 8 or 9. I couldn't drive. And like back then, there were still like long distance phone calls and things. So it was expensive to keep relationships going at a certain, not anymore, but back then it was like when you moved, you just had to start over again.
That was
The
it.
nice thing about piping is I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that because, even if I don't see a person regularly, I still see them at the contests. I still see them when I go, to the annual events that we always go to. You can catch up and everything. And now, I have friends in Portland that I keep in touch with. I have folks down in Mesa and Phoenix. So I like that element of it. But the other part I like beyond just like the community, like about the actual instrument, is I like that the limitations of the instrument require you to be kind of creative with how you use it. And I think that's a cool challenge for musicians involved in the scene.
Yeah, we talked about that a few episodes later, and that our crew had an episode where they talked about why don't bagpipes have more notes? Why would you this insane instrument of it's difficult to play. It doesn't have a lot of notes, but you're right. Creativity.
And my wife looks at my bag because she of course hears all about all of my troubles. She knows about, like, she's like, I just don't understand why anybody would choose an instrument that has 4 reeds. Why would you do that to yourself? Like,
And yet you
it
do.
sounds cool.
Yet
So I'm always
somehow it's
fighting
worth
with the
it.
instrument to make it work. And she's like, I wouldn't put up with that. And I was like, well, I've been doing it since I was 8. I have not known any different.
And now
So-
there's no escaping from it. So
No,
It's too late to go back and play tuba.
yeah.
no.
So on that note, after this many years, what inspires you to keep learning and improving your playing?
So I think for me, like, I know, like, different people, different motivations, but I think most things I ever have gotten involved in, I'm never really content with just learning it and being like, I can do that passively. It's fine. I'm good. That's cool. I'm enjoying this. Part of enjoying things for me is improving how I approach it. So piping is nice because you're never perfect at it. It's always like there's always a little bit more refinement you can pull out of things, and I like that element of it. It keeps me engaged because that perpetual development and improving skill or knowledge is something I really enjoy. It gives me something as an adult to really, like, I can, like, pull out a music book and learn new music. Like, there's no way I'm going to ever learn every single tune that I have in every music book I own. And then you have Pibroch as well, where there are these huge, big, long pieces where you have to really improve on your musical expression of it. And again, there's so many of them. I don't think I, as a working person, am ever going to learn all of them. So there's always something new for me to do in piping, and I like that. That's what kind of keeps me wanting to improve and continue playing, and why it's not boring, because there's so much to learn that it can't really get boring for me.
Yeah. I remember, reminds me of something that Ed Best says at a lot of his workshops. And he says, it's hard as an adult to realize you don't know something or you don't know how to do something. Because when you're a kid, you're 8 years old. It's like, all right, yeah, I don't know I just learned how to ride a bike. I just learned how to tie my shoes. Like, why not learn bagpipes too? But
Yeah.
when you're older, it's like, man, I can't remember the last time I didn't know how to do something.
Well, and I was telling my wife the other day, we were talking about learning new instruments and just that process. And it's like, I haven't ever learned another instrument yet, really, because I never feel like I have the time, because I'm always so focused on improving my piping. That's like, well, if I learn another instrument, then that's time I won't be able to improve my piping. And as mentioned earlier, it's like, I don't know, at this point in my life, where I've been playing the bagpipes for 2/3 of my life, I don't know how tolerant I would be at being bad at another instrument. At this point, I don't know how frustrating that would be for me, because I'm reasonably decent at the pipes. So I don't know the limitations of being a new learner on another instrument. I don't know if I would find that exciting or frustrating.
But yeah, learning new tunes and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another moment when you're like, I will get better at this.
Yeah, like, I have the tools to get better at this. But that's the other thing too, is like, I have over here on my music stand, I have like 4 music books that were published in 2020, just sitting out there that I occasionally look at stuff in. So on top of all the books I already own, they keep making new ones.
Stop writing new tunes.
There's always more music out there being written. I can't, like, even if I was able to keep up with all the old stuff, there's still the new stuff.
Just never ends.
Never ends.
Well, and I've dabbled a little bit in composing too, not a whole lot, but so I've also participated in the deluge of new music. So
There's only 9 notes. Aren't you going to eventually run out of stuff to write?
I
Seriously.
think
You
I've
would
always
think
wondered.
so.
I've always I've thought about my brother is he did math at a really high level in school, and and then there's I did some math, like I tried to do astrophysics, and that was cool, but I didn't do it ultimately. So I've always thought about doing the actual math about so you have 9 notes. How many combinations could you make those 9, like mostly to see what the theoretical maximum of different tunes could be for pipes?
How many tunes will I have to learn?
Yeah. How many theoretically do we have as far as a limit goes? And I've never actually done it. I've just thought about doing it sometimes.
That would be hard because you've got 9 notes, you've got different time signatures, you've got different rhythms and different rests that can go in. I don't even know how to do that math.
Well, and then different tune lengths, so different amounts of notes.
Yeah,
per tune.
exactly.
So yeah, I think it would actually be a daunting mathematical process.
We got to call up Alistair, phone a friend.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure Alistair could do it.
Alistair, if you're listening, you got to do the math. And then you got to come on an episode with us and talk about how you did the math.
Yeah, get your whiteboard and show us your work.
Show your work.
Yeah. Walk us through this process.
Yes.
How did you come to your answer?
I mean, hey, listeners, comment if you'd like to see that episode.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make it happen.
I'd like to. I'd like to hear my brother on a podcast. That would be fun.
We'll have to hit him up and make him do the math.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So anyway,
what has been your most memorable experience or a couple of experiences in pipe band so far?
I think the first one that popped up for me with this one, is in Sir James. We went in 2002 to the Tartan Day Parade in New York City. Now, this was April of 2002. So, September 11th was 13 months earlier. Or no, not 13, 7 months. Because of everything that had happened on September 11th, they had decided that they wanted to make this the biggest Tartan Day Parade they had ever done. They wanted 10,000 pipers. I don't think they quite made that number. I don't remember exactly. All I know is I saw Sean Connery's head because he was the Grand Master of the parade, so he led the thing. And I didn't actually. We weren't close to the front, but at one point it was like people were like, "Hey, Sean Connery," and I just saw the top of his head. So, but I think that was a really cool experience because when we were tuning for the parade, all the bands were on side streets near Central Park. And so, we were warming, and it was cold. It was absolutely freezing. It was because it's New York in April. It's still very cold there.
yeah.
And also the buildings and the wind. It was just a very cold experience. And I was 11 at the time. So we played, next to a hole in the wall, it was some sort of Middle Eastern restaurant right there. And we were in a circle and all these other bands were on the streets too. So it was just loud. And then the parade, you march down Fifth Avenue and then you turn into Central Park. And you just have all these pipe bands all playing music, and we're all playing at different times. So it wasn't like a mass bands. Every band was playing the same tunes because we were given tunes to play. But they were every band had to play them at different times, so we were all spaced out. But it was just really cool marching down the middle of Fifth Avenue as an 11-year-old in New York City at that time. And then, of course, it was the first time I'd ever been to New York, or really, I'd been to the East Coast because my family's from New Hampshire originally. But that was the first time I'd been to anywhere on the East Coast that wasn't New Hampshire. And then we also did a very, very fast one-day tour of New York City the next day after that, before flying back west to Portland. And so we went over and we went to Wall Street, and we went to Ground Zero at the time, which at the time they had cleared out everything. but some of the other buildings that were, they were still going to demolish some of them. They were still standing, and none of the new construction had happened yet. And it was just, it's a very memorable moment. That part specifically wasn't piping related, but I was there because of a band event.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I will definitely remember for a very long time. So that one is probably one of the more memorable trips, memorable moments in my pipe band history.
Yeah.
Simply because it was it engaged with history in a way, because of everything that had happened in my age, and I only was vaguely aware of what all that meant at the time. So that was a big one for me. There are others, but nothing quite reaches that. There's smaller ones, going back out onto the circle after having not played for so many years. I think the last band contest I played in with Mesa was at Pleasanton in 2009. And then I didn't play again for a contest until I went out in Alma in 2014 with Fountain Trust. So there was about a 5-year gap between bands, and it was just, the experience of going up to a band again that had drummers, for example. I hadn't heard a pipe band snare drum, let alone a corps, in half a decade. And that was really cool to play with a band again. And that's memorable just because it was a moment in my piping life. And then there's some other events things like the Metro Cup I played at this past year, which was again in New York. A lot of my memorable parts of my piping career actually ends up in New York City. So for whatever reason, but that big one is really the Tartan Day 2002.
Yeah. It's cool the places we get to go because of pipe band.
Yeah. Yeah, not quite as memorable, but still a cool one was flying, the kids band that I played in. We went and flew up to Anchorage in Alaska, and we competed in Alaska.
Mm.
Didn't know there were competitions in Alaska.
I think there's one in Anchorage. It's very small. I did solos and band. I think we were either the only grade 4 band or one of 2 grade 4 bands at the event. It was a very small event. There's the Flagstaff games. Flagstaff games are huge compared to this.
Wow.
So, but we were in Anchorage, and it was in late June, late June, and of course that time of year you're so high up in the latitude that the sun doesn't really go down even at that time of year. So that was an interesting experience. It's the first couple of nights, nobody in our band could really sleep because we didn't have blackout curtains in any of our rooms. And it was just such a weird psychological experience when you're used to when you're used to things becoming nighttime.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't. It's just a strange experience. And so a good portion of our band would just kind of hang out in the common rooms because it's there's no point trying to go to sleep because it's still daytime outside. So
bizarre.
That was an interesting experience too. But yeah, the places we go because of piping.
Yeah.
It's I would have never been to Alaska yet, except for this, and then New York I've been to only because of piping. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of places like that where it's I would never have normally gone here, but I'm glad I did.
Oh yeah, I can tell you, I probably would have never been to the middle of the mitt of Michigan if it weren't for pipes. It's just in the middle of absolutely nowhere. all respect to the people who live there. So I would have never gone there. But it's a neat area, but I would have never thought to have gone out of my way to go there.
Mm-hmm.
But I go there every year because of piping. So.
Putting it on the map.
Yeah, at least for me.
Funny. So we always ask our guests this question, and it's been really interesting the past year to hear the answers. What are you most looking forward to about piping or pipe band in the next couple years?
So the obvious one is playing in a band again in person. That's the number one. I feel like we're kind of getting into the home stretch. So, I'm at least within 12 months of being in a circle with a band again. And that's exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. I know our band is currently planning on going over to Scotland when all of this is over to compete. Whenever the first world championships that we can attend is, we plan on going over there. We were going to go over in 2020, but we didn't. So, we're going to go again at some point, and I'm really excited to go to Scotland and compete in Scotland with a grade 2 band. I've gone 3 times before, twice in the juvenile grade and once in grade 4. And so I'm really excited to go over there in grade 2. Whatever the result is, I'm excited to do that because I just love going over there every time I go. And so I'm really excited to actually get back over into Glasgow. I just love piping live. I love going to the contest there, and I'm just going to enjoy doing that. And I'm excited to do that.
Yeah.
For the most part, though, it's just getting back out there. I know locally, and we're going to get into more like Piper Society type stuff soon, but we're also locally going to be doing a little bit more of kind of ensemble presentation, educational stuff for the local community. And I'm excited to do that. We were really ramping up to do some of that before 2020. So I'm excited to be able to do everything that we were going to do in 2020 eventually in the next year or so. So that's a thing that I'm looking forward to as well. We were really gearing up. Like I was gearing up to do stuff in 2020. The local Piper Society was, the band was, and then, it just kind of fell out from under us. So I'm excited to get back to it and do all the different things we were planning on doing.
Yeah, it still doesn't feel like it's been almost a year since all that.
It's wild.
Started
I didn't even
happening.
realize that until now.
I know.
A year ago today, I was at the Metro Cup in New York.
Oh, wow.
And I had a year ago yesterday was when I competed in the grade 1 amateur invitational there. And so a year ago today, which is really weird to think about, is I was actually in Manhattan, and it was very, very cold. But my brother and we had trained into Manhattan to just kind of walk around. We went to Central Park and places like that, but to a cool Japanese restaurant. That was a cool experience, and it's just strange, I remember at the time, because it was right around the time COVID started really percolating into people's conscious as more than just that thing that's happening in China. I would remember I was going through Newark Airport, and Newark has the sky. I don't know if you've ever been, but they have a sky train that goes, all their terminals are different buildings, and they have a sky train that goes from one terminal to another. Well, to get to the shuttle pickup, you have to go through the international terminal. So I remember sitting there that day, and we were about to go through the international terminal. It's there's flights coming in from China and places like that, and so I was like, well, wouldn't it be funny if that's if I contracted this thing because I went through the terminal here? And it turns out New York was already replete in the virus at that point. I probably was at more risk in Manhattan proper than I was in the airport, but I just remember when New York did their big shutdown in early March. I just remember 2 weeks after everything. 2 weeks after I'd been in New York, there was all these pictures of the deserted, locked down streets of New York. And it was really eerie because a lot of the streets I had walked on just 2 weeks earlier. So, and thinking that all that was a year ago is just crazy.
Yeah. I was just there.
Yeah, I was just there. Well, yeah, in March when everything started shutting down here in Indiana, and there was all the pictures on the New York Times of what was going on in New York. I was my feet were on that crosswalk that the photos being taken, because they had all the pictures of an empty Times Square, and I was in Times Square. And I was like, this is crazy,
weird,
crazy thing. Because it was all so familiar, but it was all just surreal to look at the pictures when I was just there. Of course, people in New York, it's entirely different experience, but me living here in rural Indiana, it was very, very strange.
One of the couple times you've been to New York in your life. And
yeah, and it was like 2 weeks before, one of the weirdest events in New York history happened. So
weird.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah. What a time. That's, yeah. So, we will be back here next week talking to Angus about the stuff he does in his local community. And now that you are familiar with him and his career and everything that he's done with piping, it'll be interesting to see how he's taken that and sort of applied that locally. And I know we had a couple of our local to Arizona pipe majors on our podcast who talked about starting bands and keeping bands going and everything. And it'll just be interesting to see, like, young, no offense to anyone, but a younger person who's like going through that process as of the last couple of years, and how it's going and what they do. And it'll be really cool. Yeah. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this show, then support us on Patreon for exclusive content, as well as the video of us recording this. We'll have special exercises we'll be writing, as well as tips and tricks with tenor drumming and other instruments to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube for some tenor tutorials and possibly other tutorials later on. And like us on Facebook at Podband Pipecast.